What is up, Pacer Nation? Welcome to the Pacer Pulse Podcast, the heartbeat of Indiana basketball.
Welcome, welcome.
And today I wanted to do a fun episode talking about some advanced stats for certain lineup combinations. And some that have looked pretty bad together, some that have looked surprisingly dominant together. And that one I'll cover here at some point. But it will shock you which lineup I'm talking about. That has actually been our best lineup. But I will say the caveat is here. What I'm looking at here, I am using Cleaning the Glass website. It's an NBA statistics website. And what's cool about their website is they eliminate all garbage time, basically all the time that's not really competitive basketball. They eliminate that from their statistics. So this is actually like meaningful stats, I would say, that actually is kind of contributes to either winning or losing. Like I said, meaningful basketball. That's not just garbage time when we're down 30 points and different things like that. So, and they base it off possessions. So I'm going to limit this to just 30 possessions. I know that's a low number of possessions, but given it's still early in the season and how many different lineups we have played, we have a lot of different lineup combinations we've tried so far. So I'm going to limit it to 30 as like the lowest I'll go. So lineups that have at least played 30 possessions together or more. That's what I'm going to go off of here. And the way Cleaning the Glass works, they have the number of possessions each lineup has played, a point differential, so you'll see a plus minus, and then they have points per 100 possessions, so how much that team or that lineup scores per 100 possessions offensively, their effective field goal percentage together, their turnover percentage together, offensive rebounding percentage rate together, and then their free throw rate as well. And then it goes into some defensive stats too. So it will talk about how much points they give up per 100 possession and what kind of effective field goal percentage they give up to opposing teams, as well as how many turnovers they force and how many offensive rebounds they give up, etc. You get what I'm saying? I'm just trying to lay out a general guideline. So for some people that might not be so in the weeds with stats, I'm slowly starting to learn more, especially about these more advanced stats, because I just think it's so interesting, especially where this can really show which lineups have been good, which ones have been horribly bad, and it kind of helps paint the picture as to why we've done some of the things we've done as the coaching staff has. As I get into these numbers, you'll see why, and I'll explain it when I talk about them. But like I said, there's that one lineup that is surprisingly dominant since, and they played at least 30 possessions together or more. They fit the criteria that I was cutting it off at, and it was shocking when I saw that one. But so I'll start with the most possessions played together lineup, and so far this season, it has been Andrew Nembhard, Ben Sheppard, Ben Mathurin, Pascal Siakam, and Isaiah Jackson. So that lineup, they have played 90 possessions together, which doesn't seem like a lot at all. But given, I don't know how many possessions there are in certain games, how much, you know what I mean? I'm not sure how much possessions are total for each game and how that works, but that's the most we've had for one lineup so far this season is 90 possessions. And that lineup right now, they are a negative 11 point or like differential. So how they figure that is they calculate. So essentially, it's just how much points they score per 100 possessions, and then how much points they give up per 100 possessions, and then it's basically the difference between those two numbers, and that's the differential. So they're a negative 11 as a whole, as a unit for the 90 possessions they played. And their points per 100 possessions is 115.6, so not a bad number, really. Not great, but not bad. Definitely pretty solid. But their effective field goal percentage shooting as a team, as a lineup together, is 45.7, excuse me, which isn't bad, I guess. Average. I mean, not great. Turnover percentage is 10%. The offensive rebounding percentage is 29. Free throw rate 35. Some of that, I'm not sure how they calculate the free throw rate, so I won't dive too into the weeds on some of these numbers here. But the points we give up per 100 possession with that lineup is 126.9, which is really bad. That's awful. And I think a lot of that has to do with probably how much points we give up in the paint, especially with Isaiah Jackson as a starter. It's just he's smaller. He's not as much of a deterrent around the rim. Yes, he could block shots, but and I guarantee I know they don't show in this, but they probably give up a ton of second chance points with that lineup too for offensive rebounds. Let's see. Yeah, so for opposing teams, their offensive rebounding percentage against that lineup is 41.3%, which is a pretty high number, I would say. I don't know how that evens out in the grand scheme of things, but it makes a lot of sense. It kind of points to the fact that we're giving a lot of second chance opportunities with that lineup. And the effective field goal percentage we're giving up with that lineup too is 56.5, so really bad. So essentially, that lineup is awful in terms of defensive. Our defensive capabilities with that lineup is pretty bad. And offensively, it's decent, I guess. 115.6 isn't terrible. So you can see why it's a negative 11.3 differential as a whole. And you can see also why it made sense that the coaching staff went away with Isaiah Jackson in the starting lineup and thought it was our best decision to mix it up and put Jay Huff in there, which made a lot of sense, and I'll get into that more later. But it helps you kind of see the decisions that the coaching staff's also making too. And they're looking at these numbers, they're seeing which lineups play the best together. Granted, limited sample size, but it gives you kind of like a platform to kind of be like, hey, let's try this lineup together a little bit more. Let's see what they could do together. See if these numbers kind of pan out to the way they have shown so far to be. So it's very interesting. And our most second used lineup at 77 possessions together is kind of surprising, but it was Isaiah Jackson, Pascal Siakam, Jarace Walker, Aaron Nesmith, and Quentin Jackson, actually. So I can imagine a lot of that came in the Warriors game. So like I said, these possession numbers are pretty low so far because it is early in the season and we've had so many different lineup combinations. But the fact that lineups played together for 77 possessions, they are actually a very good lineup together according to these stats. They're a plus 26 together, which is awesome. They're a little worse offensively than the one I talked about before this, but they're a 114.3 points per 100 possessions. And they're shooting around 52%. And they're not turning it over a lot. They have like 8% turnover rate, which is really good. And then the points they're giving up as a starting unit or a lineup essentially is 88.3 points per 100 possession. And they're giving up 44.4% field goal percentage to the opposing team. And they're forcing like 17% turnover rate. So all in all, really great lineup. Really great, I guess, unit, you would say. I mean, we haven't seen a lot of it, so like I said, you can't really judge it too much. But given that it was a plus 26, that's a pretty huge number. And it's just unfortunate because with Nesmith going out and Quentin Jackson being out so long, it'd be cool to see that lineup combination a little more, especially where, Rick's trying to balance out the starting units and the second units and just seeing how the rotations have shaked out so far. It would be cool to see that lineup back again where, when Nesmith comes back, I know Rick likes to stagger minutes, so he always likes to have somebody that can at least create their own shot and put the ball in the basket. Kind of like how he's been doing with Mathurin lately, where he'll take him out he'll be the first guy out, but that's only so he could come back in with the second unit some and play with TJ and those guys to give another guy that can score the basketball. So it'll be interesting to see if we kind of try that lineup again, since it had been so effective, where we have Siakam out there, but once we get Nesmith back, that's another guy that can at least score a little bit next to Siakam. So we're not just having one guy out there that can score at least 14 to 15 a game, and plus with Walker too, who has his moments, but not really much this season. And with Quentin Jackson and Isaiah Jackson, I'd be really interested to see that. I think we're going to have so much more balanced units, especially once Nesmith comes back and all our other guys get back healthy too. But I thought that was really interesting. I know a lot of that probably came in that Warriors win when Quentin Jackson just went off and he played, a good amount of that game for a good reason. He had his best career game of his NBA career so far. So that was interesting to see to me. And then the third most used lineup together was at 64 possessions, and that was Isaiah Jackson, Pascal Siakam, Jarris Walker, Aaron Nesmith, and Ben Shepherd, the point guard. So that lineup, as you could probably guess, was a negative 12.5, was not a good lineup. The points per 100 possessions was really bad at 103. They were shooting 52.6% effective field goal percentage, which is okay, I guess. Like I said, I'm not super knowledgeable on that yet and like what's a good number, but that doesn't seem terrible to me. Better than anything worse than that, I guess, because we've been shooting so bad. But turnover rate is high, of course, as you would expect at 15.6% because we don't have a true point guard out there with that lineup. And then they were giving up 115.6 points per 100 possessions, letting teams shoot 58.8% effective field goal percentage against that lineup too. And we were forcing like an 18.8% turnover rate at least. So, yeah, not a good lineup. And honestly, any lineup with Ben Shepherd in the lineup as a point guard isn't going to be good. And we just, obviously with that lineup too, we didn't have the scoring. All we really had was Pascal, and especially with how bad Shepherd's been shooting this year, Walker's been shooting this year. Nesmith, even before he got hurt, wasn't shooting great at all, was kind of struggling. He did have a few big games, but overall was struggling to score. But you can understand why the points per 100 possession was really terrible with that lineup because we just didn't have any scorers. And it makes a lot of sense. And then I know at that time we really had no choice. We had to play that lineup. But, yeah, I hope we don't really go back to that very often, especially when Nesmith comes back, and we won't have to, hopefully, because any time with Ben Shepherd at the point guard, it's not an ideal scenario. So let's just pray, Pacer Nation, that that's not going to be a thing really moving forward. And then the fourth used lineup at 59 possessions was Tony Bradley, Pascal Siakam, Jeremiah Robinson-Earl, Aaron Nesmith, and Andrew Nembhard. Okay, so a little bit better. They were a +3 together. And points per 100 possessions. This is going to be the best number of any lineup combination that I'll be talking about today. 155.9 points per 100 possessions, which that seems astronomical, like really great. And I know it's only 59 possessions, so you kind of have to take that with some caveats too. But all in all, they played really well together, and their effective field goal percentage as a lineup was 67.3%, which is good, and only a 10% turnover rate. But here's another caveat. Their points per 100 possessions that they were giving up to opposing teams was 152.5. So great offense, really horrible defense, barely margin for error with that with a +3. But I'm pretty sure that's not something that you look at and are encouraged by because the opposing teams were shooting 72.1% effective field goal percentage, which is like amazing, astronomically good. And we were just forcing like a 10.2 turnover rate too. And yeah, it wasn't pretty. Yes, we were scoring a lot with that lineup in the short amount of possessions that they played together, but man, were they just getting destroyed. And as much as Tony Bradley has been a steady force and he's consistent, whatever label you want to give him, it just shows like our defense is really bad with him out there because he has no rim protection. He's not really the quickest on his feet, so he's not going to guard anybody out on the perimeter either. It's just, yeah, I'm glad he's kind of slided back into that third starting spot or third rotation spot with the centers because, like I said, he's not a guy that should be in an NBA rotation, really. I know he had big moments for us, and I really appreciate what he did in those moments, like in the finals. And like I said, I'll never forget that. But we got to be realistic here. He's like a fringe rotation player in the NBA, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. It's not a good look. So I don't ever expect to see that lineup again, especially with him and Robinson-Earl in that lineup, especially as we're starting to get healthier more. So take that one with a grain of salt too. And then the next most used lineup was at 53 possessions, and that was Jay Huff, Pascal Siakam, Ben Mathurin, Ben Shepherd, and Aaron Nembhard. So this one was very interesting because this is more recent, right? This is where guys are starting to get healthy. We have guys back. We have certain, I would say, roles starting to be solidified. And that's why this one really stuck out to me because it is one, obviously, once Neesmith comes back, he'll be in the lineup. But it's one that we could see for moving forward for a little while longer. And maybe if it's not even Shepard, but possibly, if he could provide some good defense and maybe start hitting some threes again. But this one was really interesting to me because it's also when we put Jay Huff in the lineup. And you'll see a trend here with Jay Huff in the lineup too. But so with that lineup, their point differential, or not point differential, just their differential was a plus 22.9. So really great. They were scoring the ball at 130.2 points per 100 possessions, which is great. Shooting 65.3% effective field goal percentage. Turnovers were pretty high, 15.1% turnover rate, but we were only giving up 107.3 points per 100 possessions with that lineup and holding teams to 49% effective field goal percentage and forcing like a 14.5 turnover rate. So you could see where that lineup was really effective, especially scoring and defensively, and it makes a lot of sense as to why we have turned our defense around because we were like a bottom 3 defensive team, and I know last I checked we were at least 20th or so, or we moved up quite a bit. So you could see how, especially just putting Jay Huff in the lineup, because he's leading the NBA in blocks right now, or 3 blocks. I forget what he's averaging, 2 point something blocks per game, or maybe more now. I can't remember, but he's obviously top 2 in the NBA in blocks per game, which is crazy. And then the fact he's actually been hitting his threes lately too, it makes a lot of sense why that lineup is so good. It has a good balance to it. Jay Huff being able to spread the floor a little more gives you what Miles Turner kind of did, last year, or with our team prior. And even though Ben Sheppard hasn't been shooting good, it's cool to see that it was still a really effective lineup even with him out there, because it just gives you another solid defender that, obviously his defense is hit or miss. I'm not saying he's some phenomenal defender, but he gives you a guy that can at least isn't just such a horrendous defender. That's actually a rotation level type of defender, if that makes sense. We're not playing, Jeremiah Robinson Earl out there, or guys that are fringe NBA players at least. But I thought that was very interesting, and I would almost like to see if they move back to that lineup given this data and just see how it goes, because I'm going to get into the reason why for that. Because lately we've been starting this next lineup I'm about to cover, but the caveat is here too, like I said, minimal possessions, but they have been playing, this lineup here that I'm about to discuss has been playing 37 possessions together so far. And it's Jay Huff, Pascal Siakam, Jarace Walker, Ben Mather, and Andrew Nembhard. So that's the lineup we've been rolling with the last couple of games or so. But that lineup, I know a little less sample size than the one I just talked about, but they are a negative 39.8 together differential, which is awful. That is awful. And their points per 100 possessions, 86.5, which is easily the worst lineup combination that I'm covering today. That is by far the worst. I mean, that is horrendously bad. The effective field goal percentage is 46.4, and the turnover rate is just astronomical. It's 24.3% turnover rate with that lineup. And then we're giving up 126.3 points per 100 possessions with that lineup too. And the effective field goal percentage we're giving up is 47.6%. So, and we're only forcing 2.6 turnovers with that lineup too. So really, just awfully bad lineup in terms of scoring, and then even the defense is awfully bad. And you wouldn't think, because we're having more size out there. And I'm not trying to single somebody out here, but the one difference we're seeing here between those two lineup combinations is Jarace Walker starting instead of Ben Sheppard. And not trying to put it all on him, but I think the lineup just balances out better with Sheppard out there, because it's a guy that he's not going to really do too much with the ball. He's just going to shoot when he's open, and I mean, hopefully he hits it, but at least he's not going to try to force too many things, and that's what Jarace Walker tends to do a lot. He forces a lot. A lot of it goes ugly a lot of times. It's a turnover. He's kind of reckless with the ball. He's not shooting great. I mean, neither is Sheppard, but he just makes more mistakes than Sheppard does. So it was just interesting to me. I know it has 16 less possessions compared to the other one, so I wonder how that would even out if it had more, but that's how horribly bad the difference is. And that's why I think it would be interesting if they just went back to Ben Shepherd over Jarris, at least until Neesmith comes back, and just see how that lineup does together with more playing time and more possessions together. Because after seeing that, I'm like, all right, I know the possessions aren't the same, of course, there's a difference, but that's a pretty huge gap. And especially if we're trying to win, you have to go with what lineups are working the best. And I just think you go back to that. As much as I've kind of ripped into Ben Shepherd this year for him not being able to shoot the ball at all, can't even hit the broadside of the barn, can't throw the ball in the ocean, all those terms, all those sayings you want to use, at least he makes low mistakes, even if it's only because he's not doing much with the ball in general. But he's out there playing hard at least. I'll give him that. And he goes for rebounds. He tries hard on defense, even if it's not always successful. And that's more you can say about Walker a lot of times, who will have some big games like the Detroit game. But other than that, a lot of mistakes in there. I think it makes a lot of sense to swap that and just see how it works again. Just put Ben Shepherd back in the lineup and Walker on the bench. Plus, it gives you another creator off the bench with TJ McConnell, too, with Jarris. And I think Jarris, to me, I thought he was doing pretty well in that bench role where we were kind of giving him like the Obi Toppin role, in my opinion, where, all right, he's like our other scorer off the bench, another guy that can kind of create. Let him just fulfill that role and stick to it, especially given this data that I'm seeing here. Granted, I know it's probably not too plausible because it's such little possessions, but at some point, you have to see those numbers and be like, all right, let's try this because this was more successful than this. And I think it just balanced out both units a little better considering which guys we have available. And like I was saying earlier, the one thing you'll find interesting that I found interesting was some of our best lineups outside of that Quentin Jackson, Neesmith, Walker, Siakam, and Jackson one, they both had Jay Huff in it. And makes a lot of sense, especially when Jay Huff's been shooting well from three and the fact that his rim defense has been just so tremendous. And I've bashed on Jay Huff this year quite a bit, especially early on, where I'm like, this guy should not be on the floor. I was not a fan of what he was doing, but I am so happy that he's shut me up on that end and has proven me wrong and has shown me that this guy, he can be a rotation big man, especially if he's going to play at this level. I mean, he had the first 14 points against the Bulls for us the other night. I mean, that was incredible. He had some clutch plays at the end of that game defensively to really help us win. I mean, it makes a lot of sense why some of our best lineups include Jay Huff. So, besides the one with Jarris Walker, like I mentioned, but you'll see why I'm bringing that up here because I'm going to get into this other one too with Jay Huff, that they played 32 possessions together, this lineup, and it was Jay Huff, Pascal, Jarris Walker, Ben Shepherd, and TJ McConnell. So this, after I just said that with Jarris and all that, and with Shepherd and those lineups, because I think that's the most plausible lineup that we should start with, this lineup is what really blew my mind because this was by far our most effective lineup according to these stats. And that's the one that has been the one that's just been destroying other teams and just dominates. And I get it. It's very little possessions. They only played 32 possessions together. But that lineup is a plus 71.5 together. And their points per 100 possession is 134.4 points. And they're a 66.7% effective field goal percentage as a unit. 15.6% turnover rate, which is high. And then they're giving up 62.9 points per 100 possession to teams. That is unreal. And effective field goal percentage of 18.2%. Turnover percentage of 17.1%. They're forcing on other teams. I mean, I get it. It's a low possession number. You take it with a grain of salt, but that really blew me away how dominant that lineup has been. And even with the limited possessions, that's one you got to explore a little more if you're Rick Carlisle and just see, like, hey, are these numbers true or is it just an aberration? It could very well just be an aberration, but like I was saying earlier with the Jay Huff thing, that's two lineups where he was part of like two of our best five lineups. And it just goes to show how much his defense is needed for this team to be successful on that end. And if he's knocking down threes, it helps our offense that much more. It just kind of helps paint a clearer picture as to why certain lineups work, why some haven't. and the extra spacing for our guys to be able to drive in and score with Jay Huff out there, and then our defense being able to funnel guys to Jay Huff and him protect the rim the way he does. I think we should see Jay Huff in the starting five moving forward for a good while. And I think TJ and Isaiah Jackson are a good pair off the bench. So I like that combo together. But, yeah, that blew my mind. Literally, Jay Huff, Siakam, Jarris Walker, Ben Sheppard, and TJ McConnell. And like I was saying earlier, that Rick has been liking to do so far is, he's splitting up these guys. So he's splitting up Nembhard, Mathurin, and Siakam because he always wants somebody that can score or create with the ball in their hands. So like I was saying earlier, that he's been taking Mathurin out first to put him with the second unit. I almost think that he should try to take Siakam out first. Take him out, be the first sub out. I know that doesn't make much sense because a lot of times we need him in the beginning of the game. But if we can roll with like Nembhard, Mathurin out there, maybe you put in Jarris in Siakam's spot whenever you sub Siakam out, or not Jarris even. Jeremiah Robinson Earl even. Somebody. Just somebody that could fill a role out there. And you have Nembhard and Mathurin out there to create. Robinson Earl try to shoot threes and spread the floor, and Jay Huff too. And then I know it's hard because you can't just play Jay Huff the whole quarter. But if you could somehow stagger the minutes to where you try that lineup again, where you bring Siakam in with that second unit, where you play him with Jay Huff, Walker, Sheppard, and TJ, and just see if that lineup is actually legit or not. And I think that would be worth exploring by the front office, or by the coaching staff, because too many times, especially this year, our second unit has fallen flat pretty bad. And if this shows evidence of a unit that could possibly work together, granted only 32 possessions together, but with that big of a differential, and by far the most effective, given the sample size at least, you got to try it. And I think that's maybe like an adjustment they could try to make. Granted, obviously, I'm not the coaching staff. They know better than me, obviously. But just going off these numbers, and I know they're looking at this stuff too, but I think it'd be worth a try if it can help make both units just as effective, because that's where, like I said, a lot of our games have really fallen off when we've had to bring in the second unit because we just don't have any guys that can create or score. And if you could put Siakam combined with Walker, Sheppard, TJ, and Jay Huff for a little bit, see if they are that effective, and just balance out the units that way, you got to at least try it. That's why it would be interesting to see him kind of start to take Siakam out first and let Mathurin play with Nembhard out there for a little longer and whoever else, and just try it out. Especially with Furphy coming back, I think that's going to help a lot too, because maybe we bring in Furphy for Siakam. So have him be like the first sub, come in, Furphy, because he can kind of play that 4 spot. He's tall enough, and he's kind of a small ball 4 in a sense too. But bring him in for Siakam, and then try Siakam with that lineup I just said that was super effective, and let Nembhard, Mathurin, Furphy, Sheppard, whoever else they bring in, Jay Huff out there for a little bit, let them roll for a minute and see how effective they can be. I don't know. I think you can get pretty creative with the lineup combinations and given this data. I think it'd be worth a look. I mean, what do we have to lose? We're 4-17, so I don't know why they wouldn't try just everything. And given that, if you see that it's effective, why not roll with it and see if it's legitimate or not? So that was super interesting to me, and that's the big surprise lineup that I saw that was just destroying teams. And maybe it was just one team because it was just such a low sample size of 32 possessions, but I really do believe that's a lineup they should try to pursue and try to see if it's actually legitimate or not. And I just thought looking over those numbers, it was very interesting. It was very cool to see which lineups are effective, which ones haven't been. And even if it's low possessions, that's something to build off of. And maybe it's something to keep your eye on as you're watching these games and seeing like, hey, it makes a lot more sense, some of the decisions they've been making with some of these lineups that they put out there. Which ones have been more effective for them. I will say it doesn't make sense that they put Walker back in the lineup given those numbers, but I get they probably just want some more size out there, I guess, with Walker out there. But all in all, I think they should try to put Walker back on the bench, and believe it or not, I'm going to say start Ben Sheppard again, given that kind of data, and just see how it goes. And like I said, I think it balanced out the units more. Walker is a guy that kind of wants to create more. At least with that, you got Shepard, who's just going to do nothing but stand there and shoot for the most part. You got Nembhard, Mather, and Siakam as your creators, and Jay Huff's another guy that stands there and shoots for the most part too. It just adds a different balance to the lineup, and I think that would be a lot better. And I don't know. I'll be curious to see, but just a really fun exercise to go over that, and I'll be curious to see as the season goes on how these lineups shake out and which lineups are more effective, which lineups play the most together, and if the coaching staff considers which lineups are effective or what numbers are kind of going off of. But that's what I really like about the cleaning the glass stats is they take away all that garbage time, like I was saying earlier, and they just make it purely focused on competitive basketball. None of that filler time, essentially, that doesn't really, like, real stats don't really matter in that grand scheme of things during that time. But very interesting, Pacer Nation, and I hope you guys thought it was interesting too. And I am going to do a game recap of the Nuggets game tonight. Let's hope he can pull off an upset, but man, I'm not looking forward to Jokic tearing our team up like he did last game. I mean, the guy's phenomenal, a top player of all time almost. He's going to be top 10 when it's all said and done for sure if he's not already. And I will be curious to see how JF holds up against him, considering like how well his defense has been lately. I know he's not the best on the perimeter defending-wise, but that's a matchup I'm going to be looking for just to see. All right, because J-Hub's been doing this against kind of some weaker competition. Vucevic, some better competition, but he's older. It'll be, I mean, granted, even going against an MVP candidate isn't really a fair assessment either because nobody's stopping him. But like I said, I'll be curious to see how he does and how he holds up. And I think I did hear also that Furphy is questionable for tonight's game. So hopefully that means we're going to get Furphy back and have something else exciting to see and hope that he could stay healthy the rest of the season because I want to see Furphy develop so much. He's got a lot of potential. He's super athletic. I know it might take him a second for his athleticism to come back. And if he can start knocking down threes consistently, I mean, I know I've said this in the past, but I would like to see if he could kind of surpass Shepard in the rotation, or dare I say even Walker? I mean, I know Walker was our lottery pick, so maybe that caveat alone would keep him in the rotation, but I have always kind of thought that Johnny Furphy could push Shepard for minutes. And especially given this year, the direction we're going, maybe we lead towards the younger guy. And we've already heard that Rick Carlisle loves Johnny Furphy, and he doesn't say that much about younger players. So I think that's another little storyline that's going to be interesting now that Furphy might be coming back here. And we haven't even talked about Cam Jones whenever he comes back eventually, and Nesmith and Quentin Jackson. I mean, it'll be interesting once guys are fully healthy how rotations really shake out. So it's going to be fun to see. And if you haven't checked out my last podcast, I did go over what the real ceiling of this Pacers season should be and what the expectations are and what I believe is kind of like where I see us at best performing and whether that's the best decision or is it the best decision to go tank instead to get a high draft pick. So if you guys haven't heard that one yet, go check it out. It was an interesting conversation where I wanted to just present some ideas or just my thoughts on it all right now, how I'm feeling with Pacer Nation right now with the Pacers. And if you guys want, go check that out. But like I said, I'll do a recap of the Nuggets game tonight, and I'm going to cover like who does good, who does bad. I do game notes throughout the game, things that stand out to me. I go quarter by quarter, just breaking down the stats by quarter. So if you guys are interested, check that out too. But I really appreciate you guys listening, Pacer Nation, and I will talk to you soon.